Well, hello, Ignite Church, and Happy New Year. I hope it's been a great one. Today, we are starting day one of our devotional series through the book of Matthew. We're going to be doing that every day throughout this month. And today, we're going to be discussing, naturally, Matthew chapter 1. But this is a chapter that is often overlooked. And the reason for that is because most of the chapter is a genealogy. And genealogies don't exactly make for the most fun reading in Scripture, especially when you read the Old Testament. Sometimes they are very, very long. I would actually argue that Matthew chapter 1 is the most important genealogy in all of Scripture. It is often skipped and you kind of go straight to the birth of Christ. In fact, a lot of times people just read Luke instead of Matthew, but Matthew chapter 1 is at the beginning of the New Testament for a reason. It is kind of starting off this story of Jesus, and it is establishing who he is. So a little bit of background is that the Jews were expecting the Messiah to come. The Old Testament had prophesied about a Messiah that was going to come, that was going to free them and free them from the Roman Empire and the captivity that they had been in, and kind of restore their land back to them, or at least that's what a lot of the religious leaders taught. So there was this hopeful expectation that a lot of Jews had at that time, that they were kind of looking for the Messiah to come and wondering, who is he? Well, when Jesus comes on the scene, he's not quite like they expect. He's not this ruler, this warrior figure that they were expecting. So a lot of people were not sure if he actually was. So what Matthew does is he kind of treats his gospel like a little bit of a defense of the person of Jesus, like who exactly he is, and that he is in fact the Messiah that they have been waiting on. So when he starts this genealogy, it's actually very important because to Jews in particular, where you came from, who your parents were, your genealogy was actually really, really important in establishing your identity. So what Matthew does is he starts with Abraham, and he goes 14 generations from Abraham to David, because Abraham was an incredibly important figure in the Old Testament to the Jews, because he's Father Abraham. And then you get to David, who was King David, the most famous king of all. Then it's 14 generations from him to the deportation to Babylon. So that's when Israel had been very sinful, and Babylon came in and they took control of them and exiled them. So there's 14 generations to that. And then from the deportation to Jesus is another 14 generations. So they're very parallel and symmetrical. But what Matthew is doing is he's revealing Jesus's identity, that, hey, this is the one that we've been waiting for. He is, in fact, he's of the right lineage. And then, honestly, as you go beyond this chapter, as you'll see throughout the rest of the book, is there's little things that Matthew puts in, like all kinds of fulfilled prophecies and little indications that Jesus is this one that they had been waiting on. But it's important to start with his genealogy to show that he actually can be that person, because he comes in the correct line, and he's the one that's been promised. Because if that was out of place, then there's no guarantee that he actually was the one. So this was very important what he was doing, and it really starts off the New Testament on the right foot. And then right after that, we get a much shorter version of Jesus's birth scenario, but it's also very important. So what I'm hoping is that you'll be able to read this, and not just as a boring genealogy, a list of names, but as something that really establishes the identity of Jesus, and that kind of sets the stage for the rest of the book to be so much more meaningful. So as you go forward and you listen to the rest of these each day, just kind of keep an eye out as you're reading each chapter for the various ways that Jesus fulfilled the Old Testament prophecies and the Old Testament expectations. And I think it'll make your appreciation for the Gospel of Matthew so much greater. Happy New Year. Take care.